Welcome to Motion Matters, where we shine a light on the entrepreneurial journey, sharing real stories of triumph and challenge. Guided by Jamie Tilka, we connect, inspire, and educate. This is Motion Matters.
Hello and welcome to Motion Matters. This is the entrepreneurial podcast where we talk about the trials and tribulations of entrepreneurship. Today, I have NICOLE POULTON with me. We met at a mutual mastermind that we attended just a few weeks back and connected afterwards and said, hey, would love to have you on the show. Love for you to talk about your story. And so today I'd like to welcome NICOLE to the show. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited to be here for sure.
Yeah, I'm equally as excited. So as I kind of mentioned right before we jumped on, I'm going to give you an opportunity to kind of just give everybody a little bit of background about who NICOLE is, where you came from, and ultimately what led you into the world of entrepreneurship / small business.
Yeah. I'm from Washington State. I had a bunch of entrepreneurial, family members who really inspired me growing up. My dad always had businesses. My family actually had a fruit company up there. Apples are pretty big up in Washington State. And so I just grew up with it. And I grew up thinking differently or being challenged to think differently and learning how to take your future into your own hands, and having that control. And so it was just embedded early on, and I started learning and really trying to be almost, better than my peers at certain things and doing things different. In high school, I would read books about real estate or marketing or whatever. And so doing that, and I started my business at 19, and it's just been off to the races since then.
Wow. So at 19, fresh out of high school then, yeah?
Ish. Yeah. I actually got my GED when I was 17. I decided high school didn't teach me very much. So I decided to just drop out and be done with that and start learning. And so I was about 2 years out of school when I started my first business.
So when people tell me similar things where, they basically went straight into entrepreneurship just for the sake of kind of framing out the entirety of your story. Was there any type of W-2 job, whether that's delivering newspapers or Burger King or anything before you got started?
So I actually had my first job when I was 11. I started working super early. But that was at the family business. So that was maybe a little under the table. Right. And then, I had a whole mess of jobs. I was a gymnastics instructor when I was 16. I was a manager of a Pier 1 Imports, like the candle and pillow store. I worked at a restaurant, I was a waitress, and I made pizzas. There was a bunch of little, super beginner entry level W-2 jobs. But I always had a hard time working for other people. I worked at a bakery, and I always decided I would work a job for someone else as long as it was either exciting or it would teach me something. So my favorite W-2 job, definitely, I worked at a bakery, and that was kind of inspired because I knew I would get free cookies and bread. And I learned how to make bread, and that was great. But ultimately, I rose through the ranks, and I got as high as I possibly could without, buying the owner out. And I decided I gotta keep doing my own thing.
So do you think that the entrepreneurial seed was planted for you then at a very young age, even before you ever worked outside the family business?
Yeah, I think that seeing how it was my dad and my uncles were the big entrepreneurials, in my life, seeing how they had control over their life, and it seemed like they could do whatever they wanted, and they were always, financially very well off. And so seeing that really inspired me. And then also just the conversations that you have with somebody who owns a successful business, they're different than conversations than, I would say the average person has. Maybe the psychology that I was around growing up, it was very much like, don't rely on somebody else to have your success and to make your life. And also showing the reality of the quote stable job, right? So it's a
Mm,
stable job at a business that's been established, that could change. Like the ownership can change, the CEO can change, it could go under, the market could crash. Like even the stable job isn't safe. And so
yeah.
realizing if that's not safe, then why not take a risk on yourself and then be able to have that control? And so I think that really started when I was super young. I think it was always kind of that push, not necessarily like it was that or nothing, but we were definitely encouraged to do what we liked and to experience what we really enjoyed, but definitely there was that pull to starting your own thing.
Yeah. And I asked that question because probably one of the things that I'm the most interested in when I talk to people on the show is just kind of getting your own interpretation on what that final poll was for you that made you. And I think you kind of just touched on it a little bit. I don't know if there's another layer to it as far as, you know, going for the W-2. For lack of a better term, I'm going to call it the easy button, right? I'm going to work a traditional job. I'm going to make that pay. And then it's incumbent upon for me to show up to work and do a good job. But ultimately, I don't have to worry about anything else, right?
Mhm.
Versus I'm going to take the full Monty and I'm going all in and I'm going to build a business from nothing. And so, what was that defining culmination moment for you?
Yeah, I've actually had a few because the first business was not successful, right? Like there was a lot of learning. So the first time I started a business, I was actually working at a dive shop, and I really didn't enjoy my coworkers. And so
Mm,
my direct manager, she was so nasty to me all the time. And I just would come home and I'd be so frustrated. And, I was taking it out on other people. And I realized like, this is the motivation that I need to be able to actually do something with it. So I
mm-hmm,
think the W-2 kind of was that straw that broke the camel's back. And
mm-hmm,
it really inspired me of like, I want to control who I spend my time with. And even if the job is great and the pay is great, working a traditional job, you don't have control over who's in the room with you. And so that was that first step for me. And then as time has gone on, just like when I was working at the bakery, I was working 50 hours a week. I was the main baker. And so I would have to wake up at 2:30 in the morning to go to work.
wow,
And at the end of the month, it's like the amount of pay I would get was not worth it. And so realizing if I'm putting in that much effort and I'm waking up in the middle of the night and I'm putting in all these long hours and doing physical hard labor, like you're lifting heavy loaves of, all this bread and like all this stuff. So you're so exhausted at the end of the day that you don't have the energy to do something else. And so just realizing like if I'm putting that much energy and effort into somebody else's business, I can definitely do that for myself. And so I think it's just a lot of little things that when they add up and you actually can look at it,
mm-hmm.
it just makes sense.
Yeah, I think I was listening to all of those different things that you were kind of lining out there, and I feel like just reflecting on mine and listening to other people's story, I feel like the thing that probably really drove that entirety was the dissatisfaction that you had for the work environment.
Mhm.
Because when I'm listening to you, I'm thinking to myself, damn, 2:30, and this coming from a guy who served in the military, right? Like, damn, who wants to wake up at 2:30 in the morning? That's crap. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
but then I flip it in my script in my head and I was like, but if she absolutely loved the job, like let's say that Sally worked there and she's your bestie and you just love seeing her every day. You guys talk about all these things and it's great atmosphere. Like I don't know if waking up at 2:30 in the morning is horrible, right? Which kid is sad to wake up to go to Disney World? None.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I guess I'm not saying anything profound by any stretch of the means. I think what I'm also saying is, even though all of those factors that you said are absolutely part of the equation, I feel like, you know, the one common denominator is the fact that you hated the work environment. And
Hmm.
so no one wants to go to work and be unhappy every day. It sucks.
Hmm.
And so that sounds like that was a huge piece of what finally caused you to start your first business. So you're working at the, I believe you said surf shop, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It was like a scuba dive shop.
Okay. So you're working at a scuba dive shop and you're like, this is not where I want to be.
Hmm.
So what was your first entrepreneurial endeavor?
So the first one, I decided that I was going to be like have a social media marketing agency. I was going to go
Okay.
around and, help other businesses to
Wait,
grow their social media presence.
what year is this? I just want to keep context.
Okay, this was in 2017, 2018.
Okay, cool. So 2017, 18, Nicole's building a social media company. Tell me how that kind of unfolded.
So I had mentors that I was learning from ever since I was like 14. I started being like I was joining masterminds and doing all that virtual stuff, just being in the room and learning. And so I had taken a course that taught how do you do like Facebook ads and how do you run like boosted posts and all this stuff on all these different platforms. And I had seen that other people were getting success, and I'm like, well, I know technology and I know social media, and it's just clicking a bunch of buttons, and like I figured I could do that. And so that's really where it started. Was just It was just in a group I was already in, a mastermind that I really liked the mentor at the time, and learning from him was amazing, and I had learned a lot. And then he had this offer, and I'm like, well, let me learn more. And because I love learning, so if there was a new skill that was presented to me, I definitely took it. And then it just felt so doable. So that's how I got started.
That's that's super interesting. So in 2017, 2018, can I ask, like, what was your age at that time?
So when I first made the LLC, I was 19. So
Okay.
between 19 and 20.
I'm asking that because I'm also in masterminds. We obviously met in a fellow mastermind event. There's not a ton of people at 19 that are jumping into masterminds. Was that self-induced, or was somebody else on the outskirts telling you, hey, Nicole, you really got to be in these rooms?
No, it was self-induced. I So taking it back, I broke my back when I was 15. And so
Okay.
that was the first time I had to drop out of high school. I dropped out twice. So with my broken back, I realized I'm not learning anything from school. I'm not missing out on anything. I went back for the social side of things. Like I missed my friends. And then
Hmm.
I was being told like all of these wrong facts about like when America was founded. And I'm like, I got to get out of here. So I went and dropped out. I realized that if I want an education, I had to take it upon myself to get it. And so from then, like from that time on, I just knew I had to go out and get the learnings that I wanted and read the books I wanted and have the conversations I wanted. It had to be very intentional. So I had always known, like from the early teens and on, I always knew that self-education was the way that I was going to go. And then I think also growing up, I was really indoctrinated that college is a scam. So I knew like
Mm.
going to college just to pay somebody to teach me something that they've never done, like going and getting a business degree is probably what I would have done. But then realizing that most of those professors haven't had a successful business. It's like it's easy to teach on paper, but execution is very different. And so I figured if
Mm.
I'm paying a college to teach me something. Why not pay somebody who's actually getting the results that I wanted? And so that was my mindset getting into the room and being in masterminds. And it was interesting because I was always, the youngest or one of the youngest. And I was kind of applauded for that. And I thought it was super cool. And I mean, now that's definitely not the case. I'm not the youngest anymore, and that's fine. But it's so cool to see how that mindset has stayed with other people, and so seeing the younger people get in the room and it's like, this is amazing, you're going to go far. And the cold traffic. And I also went on to Instagram. I realized that when I'm selling a product with social media, I should probably reach out on social media, and then they can see who I am. And the first company that I worked with was actually like a slacklining company. And so it was just like, it was really fun. But as time went on, and maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, I started to realize the way that I was taught to do this business felt really slimy. It felt like I was spying on people. My whole thing, like, that I was taught was learning how to go in and add the Facebook pixels and be able to monitor people's behavior online. So that way we can redirect ads. And I just didn't feel good about it. And so I stopped, like, once I realized that that's what the job was, I stopped having that fire and that drive to go out and get clients, because I didn't want to be, I didn't want to do anything unethical. And then there was also, it was really hard to try and sell a product that I didn't believe in. So there was another issue of, I have to make sure that the companies I'm working for are also in alignment with my goals and values. So that was also hard, because I see a lot of touristy things where it's like a product costs 50 cents and they're marking it up because it's on beachfront Hawaii for over $100. And it's like, this is hard ethically for me. And then the products that were being sold wasn't always ethical. And so there was a lot of those blocks just from my own values. And so that's why ultimately I decided to dissolve that business.
Before you dissolved it, though, what kind of business were you generating? Like, do you have how many companies or how much revenue had you accomplished? Because you started from zero.
Yeah, it wasn't a lot. I made maybe a couple $1,000s. It wasn't enough to fully replace my income. So I still had the W-2 job. And it was just something I really was focusing on the back end. I realized on fairly early how the ethics of the spying, I realized early on that that's what was going on. And so that company lived for probably 9 months, and the first customer came on maybe 4 months in. And so it was very short-lived. But you've probably heard this quote, there was something I was living by, and it's, fail often and fail quickly. So I knew I was learning a ton, and I had a feeling this was not going to be, my entrepreneurial ticket. This was not going to be the one that took me to the promised land. Wasn't going to be my main vehicle, but I knew that there was a lot I needed to learn. And then once I had that feeling of, okay, this is not, I've kind of squeezed the juice out of this one, let's move on. That's ultimately what I did.
Okay, cool. So Nicole takes her stab at social media marketing and realizes, I don't want to do this. So you're still working the scuba shop W-2 job, and then entrepreneurial dream aspiration number 2 comes into place. What is it, and how did it get started?
Yeah. So then the second one, I had moved from Hawaii. I did some time over in Europe and was just traveling, and then I fell in love with traveling. And so then when I came back to the States, I decided that I was going to try and I really wanted it to be a virtual thing. I wanted to be able to have the freedom, the location freedom to be able to be anywhere. So the next one was a drop shipping company. This was from the same mentor that was teaching me about social media marketing. I was just kind of hitched to his wagon and trying to learn everything that he knew or everything that he gave us. And so in came drop shipping, and I'm trying to learn the business and learn how it all works. And so at this point, I was 21, I think, when I learned this business. And this one never really got off the ground. I realized I had always heard like you're supposed to do something that you love. And so I'm thinking, okay, I don't love drop shipping, but I do love the idea that I never have to have the product. I can just, be the middleman and connect these suppliers to the individual, and it will be great. And then it's like, okay, well, what product am I going to drop ship? And at the time I was fresh coming from Hawaii. I'm thinking, oh, I'll drop ship kayaks. And so trying to logistically figure out how to do that was a lot of learning, a lot of hurdles. And then ultimately, I figured out all the tech stuff. I had created a website and like all of this stuff. I really like to front load all the tech. And then it's like, okay, now let me actually go in and try and create revenue. And I realized, at least at the manufacturers I was looking at, you have to have a minimum order of like 2,000 kayaks. I'm like, where am I going to put 2,000 kayaks? And that's a $10,000 order. And it's like, where am I going to get that money? And so it just fell apart fairly quickly. So that one didn't totally get off the ground, but all of these businesses, like I had set up the LLCs, I was all in, like it was a disaster at the beginning.
Okay. So that's fine, but you're still pursuing, you're still moving forward. What was next?
Then next I had I tried a different drop. It was kind of like drop shipping, kind of like e-commerce. So it was more so trying to do travel influenced products through mix of, I'll have some of it in-house and some of it drop ship. And then I realized what I didn't like about this business. I learned very quickly, like learn quick or fail quick and fail often, right? I failed very often and tried to fail very quickly. But I realized that all of these products that I was shipping were just junk products from China. And I didn't feel good about just cluttering people's homes and creating more of that mess. So that one failed off quickly. And then the one business that I had that really started generating revenue that I actually really enjoyed, this came along. I was now 23. I had started a business almost every year for a while, just different ideas.
Good.
So I was 23, and this came out way more naturally than that idea of like, okay, I'm going to start a business. What should I do? Let me grab at anything and see what sticks. This was more coming from demand. So I had gotten engaged in 2019, and then 2020, I'm planning my wedding, and then COVID hits. And no bakeries are taking new orders. Like I couldn't go try on dresses. I couldn't do all of the stereotypical things that you do when you're planning a wedding. And my big thing is like, how do you have a wedding without a cake? Like, how do you not have dessert at your wedding? And so I figured like, okay, I guess I'll bake my own cake for my own wedding. And so then I spent the next couple months like really trying to perfect recipes and learning and all this stuff. And then I was able to pull it off. We had like a mini destination wedding, and I was able to bake a whole cake the weekend I got married. And so then I thought, okay, if I can do this on the most stressful day ever, my own wedding, I can do this for other people's weddings. Plus, I fell in love with baking. This was when I was already working at the bakery. Like this was during the same period of time. And so I've already gotten really good at making the stuff that the bakery sold. And then now I'm transitioning into, okay, cakes and stacking cakes and all this stuff. And and I really did love it. And so then I started, my first wedding that I catered was for 300 people, and I was able to pull it off. And then as time went on, it just kind of word of mouth spread that, oh, Nicole makes cakes. And so I started doing birthdays and, the 1-year-old smash cakes and then sweet 16 cakes. And I just had that real like fulfillment of when I go drop off a cake and the customer gets to see it and it's crazy and they love it. And so I started generating revenue with this one. I started, because I love to learn, I started challenging myself on what I could make. So I started making macaroons and macaron. They're like super delicate French cookies, right? And so it's like nobody offers these, at least in the area that I lived in. Like this was a gap in the market. Nobody offered macarons. And so I learned how to make those, and they looked and tasted amazing. And so I started making my own recipes, and it just kind of blew up. And the problem with that one, and this was really like kind of, it tore my heart a little bit when I had this realization. I was really so adamant on, if you're gonna fail, make it fast, right? Like I don't want to just sit on with knowing information that this isn't going to work out and then just kind of push that can down the road. I really wanted to fail quickly. So I knew that the more successful I got with this business, the less freedom I would have. So the more sales I would make, the more I'm in the kitchen. The more sales I would make, the less days I had freedom to go on even a hike or stay local, but just be outside. And so I realized, plus being in the food industry, now I had to coordinate more so with the government, with the FDA, and like be, to standard. And you also can't, at least in the area I lived in the state, you couldn't mail like home baked goods. You can't sell food online. So I had this idea of, I'm going to have these macaroon boxes and I'm going to ship them and it's going to be a membership. And I did that. And then I realized it was illegal. And I'm like, oh my gosh, okay. Ouch. So this isn't going to last. And so, or if it was, I had to go and hire out space at a commercial kitchen and bake there. And it was going to be just a logistic nightmare. And I wasn't ready to hire someone yet. And so I decided that, looking down the line and seeing my boss at the bakery, seeing how time strapped he is, and seeing like that would ultimately be the quote unquote goal, is having your own actual brick and mortar bakery. And so seeing that his success isn't the outcome I wanted, I realized as much as I love baking and I love making cakes and I love lighting people up, this is not going to be the vehicle for me. And so I dissolved that business, and that one was hard on the heart, but that one was the most successful up to that point.
So out of curiosity, have you ever read the book, The E-Myth? The Entrepreneurial Myth?
Yes. I read it about at that time. And that was one of the things that I realized, like, okay, this is just the artist in me. And like, I gotta figure some other things out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, she starts a company all about pies, right? And that's why obviously I'm listening to your thing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And then she realizes, she's trying to be, the visionary, and she's trying to be the entrepreneur and the technician. And that, anyway, it doesn't work. And so I was thinking about you, where you fall out of love with what it is that you're doing because it becomes so much task saturation and all the other struggles of entrepreneurship. But in summary, Nicole liked baking and the concept was great, but it sounds to me like you probably had a revelation, and maybe you didn't have it to the extent that I'm saying it. I mean, you did, but maybe depends on how you process it. But for me, I've consistently said more recently is that I recognize that my strengths is I'm a great visionary and I'm great at implementation, but I'm not the operations person. Like all of that minutia stuff, like, can I do that? Yes. Do I enjoy it and love it? The answer is no. now.
Yeah.
No, I get excited. Like I just mentioned, I was talking to a gentleman right before we came on, and coincidentally, he's trying to do a social media company. And so I started throwing ideas and spitballing and brainstorming. And even though I'm not in that space, it's fun. Um, so anyway, you killed that. And so was that the last one before where you're at today, or was there some other intermediary?
Yeah, no, that was the last one before this current one.
Okay, so let's go in on. I have a one-off question before we go into your current thing. You mentioned that there was a gap, or that not a gap, but that you had made a decision to go to Europe because of traveling. What happened? Was that just like a quick vacation? You went for a week, or did you like live there for
No,
six
I moved,
months?
yeah, I moved to Lithuania. Um, it's so crazy. So, my husband, he was in this in between phase. He's a pilot. And so when we were in Hawaii, he was flying island hopping and just kind of collecting hours. And then he got a
Mm,
job on the mainland working at a bigger company. And so that transition, he had about a month in between jobs. And then once he was onboarded to the new job, it was a 3-month training process. And I'm like, well, what am I going to do? We weren't married yet. We were just dating. But I'm like, what am I going to do while you're gone for 3 months? Like, I'm going to go on my own adventure. And so I decided I was going to go over to Lithuania and teach kids English. And so I did that. I went over with a company, and then you work for 4 days and you had the weekends to travel around, and then we had a couple big breaks because I went over in the summer. So when the kids were on their little summer break, then I got to go like 2 weeks 3 weeks at a time and just go around Europe. And so when I was over there, I got to see 12 or 13 countries. I'm at 30 countries now. Talk about freedom of location, getting to travel a lot. But
yeah.
yeah, over there, it was just, I had this idea of, well, if I go to Lithuania, that really makes me super central for Europe. And so why not?
Well, it's a slight sidebar, but it's definitely connected to growth in general. And so I was blessed by the fact that I've, either been to and or lived in, well over 20 countries in my military career. And I constantly tell people that when you have those cultural experiences and that diversification of just seeing that, I mean, the way it shapes and molds you as a person, just from a humanity perspective, social nuances, cultural aspects, it's just incredibly valuable. And so I would encourage anybody that has never left the United States of America, and some people not even their states, right? Is that when you go out and about, right? It's that exploration and that interactions with other people. It just shapes you in tons of ways that it's it's just too difficult to explain
Yeah,
until you experience it.
100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
traveling to foreign countries, it definitely, I've learned more from just that life experience, like all of the traveling, than anything else.
Yeah. No, I'm happy that you got that experience, and just wanted to plug that I think people should really try to do stuff like that. That's so awesome that you got to do that. So that's cool. So now I need you to start bringing us into this final phase of our flight together, where what is your current business? How did it start, and where is it at now?
Yeah, so give you a little bit of context for those of you listening. I am 6.5 years sober. So around the 4-year mark, I decided to celebrate my 4-year sobriety. I'm going to buy dreadlock extensions. I had always wanted dreadlocks, but I did not. I had really bad commitment issues, so I wasn't going to dread my own hair. So I had come across these dreadlock extensions online. I'm like, I'm doing it. I'm going all in. And I bought them. They show up in the mail, and I'm like, what do I do now? Like, how do I actually put them in? How do I maintain them? Like, what am I getting myself into? And so I looked on YouTube and there wasn't really anything there. And so I'm like, well, I guess I'll just figure it out. And I should probably record myself as I do it, just in case I have any aha moments or I have any real like breakthroughs on how this works. So that way I can upload it to YouTube and help somebody else, because somebody's got to be searching this. So
Yeah.
I did that. And I did the install, I did an unboxing, and I did a tutorial once I figured out, okay, do this with your fingers, like, because you just braid them in. So it's super simple. But once I realized that, I'm like, oh my gosh, people need to know. The world should know.
Yeah.
So I uploaded these videos and they started to take off. And I was really shocked by the success that they were getting. Like, people were commenting, and I was being like, I was able to answer questions, and I was helping other people. And so I started, when they had questions, I would make a new video and answer that question. And so I started to grow on YouTube, and I started getting these comments that said, "Thank you so much. You're changing my life." Like, giving me confidence for the first time, being able
Mm.
to, like the way I look in the mirror for the first time. And I'm getting these super heartfelt comments and messages in my inbox of, like, there was a woman who had lost her husband 4 years prior. He had passed away, and she hadn't been able to really feel happy and in love with herself since then, and all this stuff. And then she gets the dreadlocks and she sees my video, and then now she's like giving me all this credit. I'm like, what? This is you're looking at yourself. But I realized that if I'm changing people's lives with my hairstyle, I need to speak about what really matters. And so
Mm.
that's where I decided, okay, I need to start learning the skill of speaking, because obviously we can all have a conversation, but when it's actually getting on a stage, that's a different ball game. So I knew I needed to learn from someone, having that learning mindset, always getting in the room, who has the results that I want. And so that's how I decided, like, a little bit of my past. Like, I grew up in a very abusive household. Like, I commend my dad for giving me a lot of this mindset I have and this drive, but he was also my biggest challenge growing up. So I had a lot of experience with sexual abuse in the house. And then after breaking my back when I was 15, I got hooked on my pain pills, which is why, I mean, it's crazy how everything works together. And so being sober when I was 4 years sober and getting the dreads and everything, so it all looped together. So I decided I needed to share about how I was able to get sober and how it's been, sustainable and actually enjoyable. And this is something that not a lot of people know about. And so I decided to go and learn how to speak, and then going through the mentorship, learning how do you actually make it into a business that is successful and sustainable, and so that's what brings me to here, is like, I'm able to help other people now, not just with the overcoming trauma or the addiction side of things, but all of the messes that I've made in business now I can turn and help other people of like, okay, avoid this, do this, and condense that time. So instead of having to have 4 or 5 unsuccessful businesses, you can just get going and get your success that you're looking for.
Yeah, but I think that you needed that, right? Like, I think that's probably what shaped you to where you are, right? I mean, you keep saying it repeatedly, and I just keep nodding my head yes, right? Because I don't want to interrupt you. But you know, fail frequently and fail often, and that's exactly what you did. And I think the fact that you knew that going into that, I mean, I think I told you this analogy when we first met in Florida, but right, I jump out of the airplane without no parachute, and so that's not a preferred method either. So I think the fact that you recognize, wait, I'm going to jump out of this aircraft, I should probably have a parachute, and oh yeah, by the way, I also should probably understand a little bit about the functionality of this. So I think the fact that you understood that, really, even though it may not feel like you did, you probably accelerated your timeline, because it may have taken you 8 iterations, 12 iterations, 24 iterations, who knows, right? So kudos for you on that.
Yeah, and I also think that there's something to it about the enthusiasm when you go into a business after just having to dissolve a prior one like 6 months prior, so it's like how many times I've had to go through and apply for another LLC or make a new website. And it's like, definitely, I'm shortening how long it takes me to do those processes logistically, but also for me to understand, like, it has nothing to do with me. Like, yes, I am the chokehold in each business. It's things that I either don't know how to overcome or I'm not willing to overcome. Like how with the baking, like I loved it and I was excelling at it, but I was not willing to have those challenges of the location um, structure and then also dealing with the government in that way. I didn't want to have to do all of those things. And so I wasn't willing to overcome that. And so recognizing that if this is not what I want, if I am not fully in alignment with this, that's okay. And I can move on and not get so discouraged over the quote failure.
Yeah. No, that's great. So just to get a little bit more specificity into what it is you right now. So you took the speaking, that's obviously the mutual mentor that we currently have. And what is that business shaping out to be right now? Like, what is it that Nicole is doing today?
Yeah. So I decided to really look at the end in mind. So this vehicle, I feel like of all of the businesses I've had, this is my vehicle. And it's so cool because it actually feels different this time around. But looking 10 years from now, it's like, what do I want my life to look like? What do I want my days to look like if I had just an average day? Because you have these people who are saying, like, what is your perfect day in 5 years? What is that going to look? It's like, well, obviously we'd all be on a beach somewhere, like, so what does your average day look like? And for me, it's like, well, I want to have kids and I want to be able to have my family as my focus. And I want to help people with the impact that I have, but I also want to be able to make dinner for my family. And, so I want a lot of time to myself. I want to be able to be at home, not have to be on the road or have to, all these quote have tos. I want it to be something that I want to and I get to do. So starting with that in mind, that's really how I've decided what I'm going to pursue over here on the front end. And so what I did was I created a program that I can take people through to help them solve a problem. And it's very niche and it's very, I have success in it with myself and with other people that I've helped before the business was started. And so I knew that it was needed in the marketplace. And so with that, I decided, okay, let me go out and get clients, prove the process. Let me reiterate anything that needs changing or updating or fixing. And then let me start a group program that then more people can be helped at a lower price point. So that way there's less, the barrier of entry is less. And then I can also buy back my time. So with that idea in mind, that's kind of the path I've been going down. And then the public speaking is to raise awareness for the group coaching. So I still have the one-on-ones, but it is, you're paying for my time. And so that is definitely more expensive. The group is way more reasonable because I'm able to do, you can have 2 people in the group or 200 people in the group, and it takes the same amount of time for me. And so growing the group is the priority. And then on the back end, speaking because I love it. So as I want and as the travel permits, so if it were to get in the way of my lifestyle, then it's not incongruent with what my goals are. But if it enhances the lifestyle, then great. So then public speaking is that third prong where I can travel to speak or I can do it virtually like this, and the goal is to raise awareness for how to help other people deeper.
Yeah, I love it. we're on very similar path.
Mhm.
But as we both know, our stories that bring us to this are uniquely different, and therefore can uniquely help other people that, you know, are in the same situation but want to change their circumstances. So
Mhm.
that's super cool. I appreciate you sharing all that, and definitely wishing you tons of success on that. So with that, I think what we'll do is we'll wind down. Got a couple questions for you. Um, for any aspiring entrepreneur or even somebody that's already in the game, but maybe just, looking for additional, pointers, perspective, like, is there one big advice that you would give? I mean, it could be from something that you experienced during your, education, or a podcast or a book, or just your own personal experiences. But what's one big piece of advice that you would give an aspiring entrepreneur on um, what not to do, or potentially how to collapse their time sector?
Well, I would just reiterate the advice that I had. So fail quickly and fail fast. Like fail often,
Hmm.
fail fast. Because
Yeah.
as soon as you know that something's not in alignment with you, you got to nip it in the bud, because otherwise you're wasting your own time. And
Yep.
then if you're in business, this is advice that I still have to remind myself of fire yourself. Like if you don't like doing the social media, get somebody else to do it. That shouldn't be your job, right? Like
Yes.
fire yourself for the things that you don't excel at.
Yes. Man, I wish I had realized that one so much earlier. Unfortunately, I was hard headed and I felt like I needed to, I was required to, and therefore forced myself to learn a bunch of shit that ultimately, if I had just maybe spent a little bit more of time and been smarter like Nicole, then I would have realized I don't need to do that. Nor do I want to do that. So, another piece of great advice. Thank you so much for sharing that. Um, yeah, finally, I just want to give you an opportunity, kind of tell everybody out there, uh, how can they get a hold of you if, like, they're interested in talking to you or hiring you for a speaking engagement, or want some one-on-one coaching? Like, how do they get a hold of Nicole?
Yeah, well, my website has all of the links and the goodies. So that is just NicolePoulton.com. You can find me over there, send a message, book a call, find all of my freebies and all that stuff. So definitely head over to the website.
Awesome. Nicole, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come on the show. Thank you for sharing openly all of your trials and tribulations. My goal through this forum is to hopefully inspire, educate, and connect people so that they can pursue their dreams and aspirations. So, uh, sincere thank you for sharing your time, Nicole. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And we'll talk again soon.